Good evening, everybody. It's August 24th, hurricane season 2010 still cranking up as we get closer and closer into the heart of hurricane season. And this evening we do have quite a few features we're watching. You can see the entire tropical Atlantic the last 24 hours or so. We are monitoring four systems. The first system is in the Gulf of Mexico, has a very low chance for development, but if it does develop, it will generally move west towards Texas and the Mexican coastline. From an old frontal boundary here, these get over the Gulf, and sometimes they can spin up, and you can clearly see that's what's been happening. There's a little bit of a tail left behind, and it's blowing up some thunderstorm activity over the Gulf. The second system is obviously Danielle, an erstwhile hurricane, back down to a tropical storm. It is forecast to become a hurricane again, and then a Category 2 hurricane, and then make that turn out to sea. However, the models have moved a lot further west than they were yesterday. Not necessarily a threat to the East Coast yet, but definitely a threat to the island of Bermuda. You can see behind it we have a system that is very, very close to becoming a depression, 90% chance of development the next day or two into a depression, and it is forecast to continue west-northwest and then probably a bend back west, at least for a good while. We don't know what will happen after that. And look at this monstrous wave leaving Africa. This one here bears watching for sure. We're going to track all this very, very carefully. Now here's the latest on Danielle as of 5 p.m. Eastern Time. It was at 17.5 north, 48.2 west. Winds were down to 70 miles per hour, gusting to 85. It's moving west-northwest still at 18, 993 millibars, so the pressure has gone up a good bit since it reached 100 miles per hour earlier today. It goes to show just the 30 mile per hour decrease in wind once that eye wall was affected by the dry air and wind shear. Again, you can see it is forecast to regain hurricane strength later tonight or early tomorrow, and then make that curve northwest, then maybe bump a little west-northwest again, then back to the northwest and finally north by the time the weekend comes as at least a Category 2 hurricane. But if you remember Hurricane Cindy in 1999, it was very, very similar. It became a hurricane, Category 1, then weakened to a tropical storm, then came back, and as it was making its turn way out here, it actually became a Category 4 hurricane. So don't rule out some serious intensification as the system's turning, especially if it gets in a much more favorable area for development. But you can see Bermuda, you are now in the cone. You weren't in the cone yesterday, you are today, and you're pretty close to the center of the cone, which is where the greatest certainty is for the track. You can see these models yesterday were taking it generally in this area, a turn definitely by 60. Some of the ensembles here were looping it around close to the East Coast. You can see now what they're showing, clearly there's been a westward shift. The ensembles are much further to the west here, and we're dealing with the threat now that this could actually directly impact Bermuda. At least indirectly, we're going to have high swells, we know that, but if the current motion continues for a while, and then it gradually makes a curve, we could be talking about a direct strike on that island of Bermuda if that were to pan out. Right now it looks like it might keep enough latitude to just miss you to the east, so you'd be on the weaker side of the hurricane when it becomes a hurricane again. But right now, you're still going to have to deal with high swells regardless of what happens with that. Here's the latest satellite imagery, and it looks like a hurricane again. It's really a technicality, 70, 75 right now. With those grays showing up, that looks like the eye wall's probably having trouble on the western side there. The east side of the eye wall looks pretty intense based on those grays showing up. But notice this kind of flatness here on the west side. This is a perfect indication of a system getting undercut and westerly shear affecting it. We saw the same thing in Hurricane Francis 6 years ago. Geez. But what happened with Francis was that no matter what it did, it could never gain back its western side before it was too late and it was making landfall. This is probably going to have an opportunity to do that once it starts to move a little bit further north, and as that side kind of flips around and it becomes symmetric again, it will be able to strengthen. Here's a better look at it, a little farther view to show you. Look at how the system at the beginning of this loop clearly fell apart, and the center was right here, and note here how the shear just affects it. These little winds here streaming in a direction much like this, just straight towards the system, and it was undercut. I'll show you that in a minute on the shear map, and you could just see what generally happened. It became exposed, and then as it got exposed, it came right back again, and that convection is now firing pretty good. But clearly earlier today, this thing was having a lot of problems with that exposed center there as it continues that motion on-off towards the west-northwest. But nevertheless, it's trying to re-strengthen. It does look like a hurricane again, I'll say that, and it'll be no surprise if over the next couple of hours and overnight it regains hurricane intensity. No surprise at all. This is still very close to hurricane status. Now, here's what happened with Danielle. You can see we have this high pressure, which, for those of you who might go, come on, Mike, explain a little easier. High pressure moves clockwise. Now, you may think if these are over the top of hurricanes, which move counterclockwise, how the heck can that help it strengthen? Well, here's the thing. Hurricanes need that exhaust up and around the system. So when you have clockwise high pressure around the counterclockwise spin, that's favorable. Now, what's happened in the case of Danielle, you can see the center of the high, this little safe harbor, if you will, for it, is off to the southwest of the actual center of the tropical storm. So it's on the side to where that ventilation is blowing right into it, and look at these shear values, 30, 20, 35, 10. It's getting sheared a good 5 to 25 knots. So once it moves out of that, things should get more favorable. You can see the lower wind shear values up here. But until then, we're going to have to deal with it. You can see for the Gulf of Mexico, it's kind of 50-50. Our front's kind of out here, and if it does move west, it'll have low wind shear and very warm waters, but it's nothing organized yet, low chance for development. You can see Danielle even better, that shear affecting it's going to move on out. That's why I'm saying right in this area here near Bermuda and to the southeast of it, it could have some pretty good opportunity for strengthening. And off Africa, anything comes off, wind shear should be favorable. This is what we're dealing with. This was yesterday's map on 96L. Look what has happened in 24 hours. Clearly there's been a significant westward shift. The models are pulling this thing, right now the current motion straight west. This is the current motion right now. And if it continues this 5-6 days, it'd end up Costa Rica, Hurricane Felix 07. However, it is expected to gain some latitude, but a lot of these models keep it moving generally like that, which would be a significant threat to the northern islands. Look at this ensemble here, even trying to take it close to the Turks and Caicos. That would not bode well, because even if it took a good turn to the north, it would still likely impact the United States, even though from that map, if we're dealing with that, we'd probably be dealing with something further south. However, the indication is that it may eventually gain some latitude, but with the exception of the GFS here, we're not seeing any real models turning it north. You can see a lot of these models are keeping it straight to the west. HWRF and the GFDL, they're keeping it generally west to west-northwest. Same thing with the NOGAF, same thing with the UK Met. All these models generally west. That's not good news if this develops. It's not good news at all. Here you can see off Africa the last few days the genesis of Hurricane Danielle and our new system trying to develop here. Again, 90% chance here on the red blood water vapor, as I've been calling it for years. You can see there's our system. Not looking all that great, but it's definitely trying to develop, as it'll move pretty much straight west based on the models. And behind it you can see a very strong tropical wave moving off. This could mean big trouble down the road. And there's, of course, Danielle trying to fight off whatever shear it's dealing with. Here's the Canadian model, and you can see it takes Hurricane Danielle north. It takes our second system and kind of shears it out here. Another system forming off Africa in 5-6 days. And look, a system forming in the Caribbean heading to the Gulf. That would not be good news by any stretch of the imagination. The GFS is more interesting. Look at this. It shows a bunch of systems. There goes Danielle scraping New England. There goes Earl. Here comes another storm, Fiona, which turns out. And look what comes after that. Gaston, Ermine, Igor. We're getting down the name list if this GFS pans out. Now, it's long range, but I'm telling you, this is why, just because we haven't had any really big storms yet, don't think we won't. You can see the no gaps here showing our hurricane moving to the north. Here comes our second system, and a little twist down here in the Caribbean. We got to watch, and some activity off Africa, but mainly the big feature is Danielle, which goes right over Bermuda. Bermuda is where that blue dot is I just drew, and you can see the eye goes straight over it. Look at that. Bada bing, right over the island and right in the right eye wall. If it's a Category 2 or 3 hurricane, we saw what Fabian did as a 3 a few years ago. That'd be very, very bad indeed. We wouldn't want to have to deal with that in Bermuda. Finally, in the Pacific, we have Frank, 70 miles an hour, almost a hurricane. Probably won't do it right away, but it's going to become a hurricane eventually, Category 1. Move on out, cause high swells along the coast. And other than that, we're not really dealing with much with it. You can see there's the visible satellite imagery as it gets kind of dark. Still blowing up, still having some trouble, but it's keeping that convection over the center, and that's what you want to see for intensification. I'm Mike Naso from IPR with this 10.5-minute update. I'll see you next time.